My name is Sydney Sager, and to give you a little background on myself, I'm a sophomore here at Spoon River College, and I'll be graduating this spring to transfer to. On my page, it does say blank blank because I have yet to make the final decision on whether I'm transferring. However, I have some great options, and those include University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Clemson University, South Carolina, and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And so wherever I end up, I will major in psychology with a minor in sociology. And so today my presentation is called the Internal Toolbox. And so to give you a little inspiration behind the term of the Internal Toolbox, it actually came from seeing the poster for this year's college team presentation. My eyes, as I'm sure many of you guys as well, was drawn to the image of the hammer, which I want to point out was designed by Jamie. And so when creating good trouble and breaking the bad stuff, you need all the tools in your toolbox. And now the toolbox that I want to discuss today is not what normally comes to mind when you think of a toolbox. Instead, this toolbox is more metaphorical, hence the term internal toolbox. But before I get started today, I would actually like to share a quote with you that was first introduced to me, it is not coming up, but it was first introduced to me in a Dr. Bob Zellman course. If you don't know who Dr. Bob Zellman is, you probably feel like you do at the end of this presentation because he was definitely a huge inspiration to me while writing this. But this quote should say, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I will spend the first 4 sharpening my axe," Abraham Lincoln. And so this quote shows preparation and how important it is. When creating good trouble and breaking the bad stuff, you need preparation. And the preparation is acquiring tools for your internal toolbox that are essential in helping you achieve success in a profession and as a conscious citizen. And so when I say conscious citizen, what I'm emphasizing is a citizen who is aware and not just passively moving through the world. Yeah. And then you guys may be wondering, why do these tools I'm going to discuss today, why do they matter or how are they valuable? Well, these tools can equip people with the ability to become conscious citizens. Like I said, knowing how you can influence the world and how the world can influence you. Number 2, the more tools in your toolbox allow you to adapt more easily to challenges. And so those can be challenges in the workplace, challenges here while getting your education, or just challenges in your daily life. And number 3, the tools allow you to gain new tools by building off the ones you already have. So you should be able to gain new tools faster and easier. Okay, so the first tool I will discuss today is the ability to think critically about information and ask questions about what you think you know. So, for example, ask questions about whether your beliefs are something you chose, or perhaps the beliefs of your parents, or possibly their parents' beliefs as well. Once you ask those questions, it's about thinking critically to discover your beliefs, or possibly rediscovering that you still have the same ones you had before. The difference is now, your critical thinking gives you the confidence in your beliefs. And I want to emphasize that this confidence doesn't mean that your beliefs will forever remain static, but instead that your beliefs can change and adapt if you're presented with new information or discover a new perspective. And so I do want to emphasize that these questions you can ask are 100% uncomfortable, but the discomfort is so valuable. Humans in general can do everything in their power to avoid the uncomfortable, which I am definitely guilty of too, because it doesn't feel good or feel content to be uncomfortable. However, you've probably heard the phrase before, get comfortable with discomfort, or be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because being uncomfortable allows you to learn from opposing viewpoints and to have positive personal growth. Once you get started, it will be easier to get comfortable with discomfort. You may even get to a point where being comfortable feels wrong or off because you can recognize you're not challenging yourself or your viewpoints. So now that I've told you about the skill of critical thinking, I'm going to tell you about the skill of the ability to detect true and false information. The ability to detect true and false information is an essential tool to have in your toolbox, especially when it comes to work and getting your education, because it's important to be able to discover false information and bias so it doesn't sweep into your research. However, with technology and the massive amount of information available, it can be challenging to discover what is true from false. Being a skeptic is the foundation of discerning true from false information. Now, when detecting true from false information, I have an example to better explain this process, which is seeing your mind as a house. Therefore, when you hear questionable information or statistics, imagine they knock at your door. However, you do not have to let this information into your mind. Instead, you can sit with it on the porch and ask questions. Researching and finding new information about the subject can aid in your decision to either welcome the information in or dismiss it. And so, an example I have to better explain this, well, I do want to emphasize that with social media and mass media in general, we don't always have time to sit with information and mull over it since it comes at such a fast rate. However, taking time to practice skepticism when there is time available is essential because you may be able to pick up on little tells or hints the information seems off. So an example I have for you is imagine you see a video posted by your favorite TikToker, YouTuber, or influencer stating that the moon is made out of green cheese. Well, that's a very trivial and childish example. However, it could be easy to accept the information into your mind because it's being said by someone you admire or you respect. However, just because the information is coming from someone you look up to or an authority figure doesn't always mean they're offering completely accurate information. So I would suggest that you are always conscious when you're taking in information. Now, I do want to point out that this in no way is saying never to listen to authority figures. This is definitely not a PSA for boycotting the information given by authority figures. Instead, I just suggest always be conscious when you're taking in information. Okay, so now that I've told you the skill of critical thinking and the ability to detect true and false information, I'm going to tell you about communication. So there are 2 points in which communication is vital to have. The first way is in regards to how we talk to others. So communication is important in having an argument or debate with someone in the way that they can hear it and understand, not making the conversation feel like a personal attack. Once a person feels like they get defensive, they do what I call putting it in their earplugs. Once these earplugs are in, they can no longer hear you in a beneficial way because they've gotten defensive. One way you can prevent that from occurring is to talk calmly, which seems easy, but it can be very easy to get caught up in a moment. So, when debating with someone, you have the responsibility to make sure the conversation remains about the issue at hand. The ability to communicate allows you to understand where the conversation is headed. Therefore, if a person starts talking about something that does not pertain to the issue, it is your job to steer the conversation back. An example I have is imagining you're arguing with someone, a sibling perhaps, about whose turn it is to control the remote. And instead of finding a solution by figuring out who had it last, they throw in the phrase, well, your socks look funny. Now, if any of you have siblings, I'm sure you can recognize that. That is a pretty tame response you would get in return, just saying something about socks. But it goes with this example, so I'm just going to roll with it. It can be very easy to get hooked on the last comment and to just get attached to it. But it's important to recognize that if you do, then the conversation remains about being less about the issue at hand and more about funny-looking socks, which would not be a good conversation to have. And so it's important to recognize that you may have to walk away from the conversation if the person you're talking to is not ready to have the conversation and look for a solution. Now that leads me to my next point. It's important to know why you're going into an argument or debate. What do you want your end goal? What's the outcome you're looking for? Are you going to debate and do you want to consider your end goal? Are you looking for a solution? Are you looking for power? Or are you just wanting to be heard? Knowing why you're going into an argument is essential because you don't want to go into arguing just for the sake of arguing. You want to figure out why you're going into it because you may even decide that you're not ready to have this conversation yet, or the person you're talking to is not ready to have this conversation yet. And so you come back to it at a time when you both feel more prepared. So the second way I want to discuss communication is in regards to talking to yourself. Believing that you can make a difference. You can choose to make good trouble. You can choose to make good trouble. You can ask questions. You can choose to make good trouble, and no matter how small or large your contribution is. Which that sentence alone takes me back to Michael Maher's college student presentation, which he showed a picture of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. In this presentation, he prompted the viewers to look at how the people in attendance of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech were making good trouble. Even if it may seem like in a smaller capacity than Martin Luther King Jr., they're just as important. And I wanted to share this with you today because I know how easy it can be to get discouraged when you feel like you're not making a big difference. However, it's important to remember that even the smallest difference can cause a chain reaction and can make so much difference in the long run. So our self-talk is so powerful in influencing our thinking. If you think you're powerless, then you become powerless. This highlights a different college student presentation that I also wanted to share today that was actually Dr. Zellman's presentation, where he did share the profound phrase of what you think you become, which is famously said by the Buddha. So, all in all, what am I trying to emphasize? It's important to believe you can fight for change and you can make change. If past generations believed they could not make a difference, we would be living in a very different world. Therefore, our job is to show future generations they have power. The way we communicate with ourselves shapes our reality. So, you guys may be wondering, what do all these tools mean? Like, how do I get them? Where do they come from? Well, I think the best way to get all these tools is through your education. So getting an education is one of the best ways to acquire the tools that will offer you preparation. There are many times when people, myself definitely included, have just thought about getting through this time of my life, just getting through college, my undergrad, to get to my profession, get to my other parts of my life. Like, it's not as important. However, the ability to have this opportunity is rare and is a privilege. People in developing countries often can envy the very thing we take for granted. Many boys and girls are unable to get an education due to resources or the need to work for their families to survive. Oftentimes, when education is offered in developing nations, it is only offered to males. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. In other words, what I'm really trying to emphasize is we're lucky to have the options we do have available. And then the last thing I want to share on this slide is a quote that is actually in this very building, which I find it very fascinating that I walked by it so many times before taking a second to stop and read it. It is by B.B. King and sits right outside the business offices. It states, "The beautiful thing about learning is nobody can take it away from you." Now, I was really drawn to this quote because it emphasizes that the knowledge and empowerment that comes from learning cannot be taken away, cannot be lost like tangible objects or destroyed. Instead, getting this education allows you to equip yourself with power and freedom because you're learning something that will stay with you. And so, regardless of unforeseen personal circumstances or challenges, you can always count on the timeless value of knowledge, which I feel like is a very important thing to be able to count on. Okay, and so lastly on my works cited page, which as you can see, my works cited page is in parentheses because I did not cite a scholarly article or website at all. But, sorry Laura, my bad. But I do believe my sources hold a very high importance, and so I wanted to mention them today. Which is all previous college student presentations. Each presentation was an inspiration to me when I was writing mine. The vulnerability and the way they planted new seeds in my head were just amazing. And so I just owe all of them a thank you, and they definitely should get a spot on this presentation. And number 2 is 4 semesters with Dr. Zellman, ethics, or religion, logical and critical thinking, and philosophy. Now, Dr. Zellman did warn me that I might need therapy after all these classes, but I can assure you I'm doing just fine. And I would recommend anyone to take some of his courses. If you want to ask uncomfortable questions and talk about topics that are normally not discussed, he's the perfect guy to do it with. And I just recommend going in one of his classes, sitting in. I can assure you probably want to take another one of his courses in that following semester. Number 3, Laura Bandy, who just soothed my fears of coming up here and just falling on my face, laughing out. And so her kind words and her just unwavering confidence in me has been just so great. And then finally, Michael Maher, who I just want to say gives so much of himself to the faculty and his students to support them. And he just deserves a round of applause just being him. And so I also just found out, and I want to kind of promote him, that he's coming back to the Canton campus. And so, yeah. And so he will be here Tuesdays and Thursdays, I believe. And so I'm kind of sad that I didn't get to take him in person, but I would recommend if you have the chance to please do it because he's great. And so finally, thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions or thoughts, I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you have any answers, as Dr. Zellman would ask, I'd be happy for you to share them as well. Thank you guys so much.